We're going to start this morning with a wonderful presentation by Dr. Stamatios Kartalopoulos. Many of you know, of course, Dr. Kartalopoulos and his wife Anita. And in your book, you have a full bio. I will just highlight a few things before we ask Stamatios to come up and make his presentation. Dr. Kartalopoulos has achieved distinction nationally and internationally as a scientist, an academic, and an inventor. While pursuing a stellar career in the United States, he never forgot his historical roots in Pergamon, never lost sight of his historic memory of Hellenism in Asia Minor, which I know has touched all of us, really, and never forgot his desire to honor the legacy of all of those whose roots were also in that historic land. His desire to document the history of Hellenism in Asia Minor led to a decade of research on the cities of Asia Minor, thus leading to his work on the cities of Asia Minor. His repeated experience encountering Greek Americans who knew that they had Asia Minor roots but knew nothing other than perhaps the name of the city from which their ancestors immigrated, illustrated the need for the research and content that is set forth in a two-volume treatise entitled Hellenic Cities in Asia Minor, Where the Stones Still Speak. Dr. Kartalopoulos and his wife, Anita, who is of course here with us, a Manhattan attorney, are the proud parents of Vasilios, a Dartmouth graduate, and Stephanie, a Harvard graduate, and are members of St. Mark Greek Orthodox Church in Boca Raton, Florida, and Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Church in Westville, New Jersey. They reside in Boca, Annandale, New Jersey, and Porto Rafti, Greece in the summer. It sounds like a perfect combination. We're all jealous of that. So with no further ado, Dr. Kartalopoulos, please come and join us. There you are.
Good morning. Kalimera. Your Eminences, Your Grace, Jim Logothetis, our chairman, thank you for the introduction. Paulette Poulos, Executive Director and Pillar of Leadership 100. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege and great honor to be here to address my fellow Leadership 100 members. Paulette told me that I have plenty of time to talk, but do not worry. I'm a research engineer by profession, so I will keep it brief. I've spent a good deal of my professional life, not in economics, not in medicine, not in entertainment, not in manufacturing, not in politics. Instead, as a research scientist, I worked on cutting-edge projects that helped the economy to grow, telemedicine to advance, communications to rise to an astonishing level, and to become significant geopolitical tools. I was a scientist at Bell Labs and later moved on to academia. As a result of my research both at Bell Labs and academia, as Jim told you, I author more than 300 peer-reviewed scientific articles, and I was awarded 20 US and international patents. I received several distinctions and was named Fellow of IEEE by 2 societies. I authored 10 books, some translated to other languages, and some reprinted in other countries. I also developed new graduate courses on fiber optic networks and served as doctoral advisor and dissertation director to many PhD and graduate students. My latest research and book was on security of fiber optic networks, laying the foundation of very advanced and important topics. My work was noticed by major institutes, and I was invited to lecture nationally and internationally. This is by way of my professional activities. Concurrently with my professional career, however, another subject was my passion, history. I deliver cultural geography seminars. I was invited to speak on Greek history and traveled extensively in Greece, Turkey, Italy, and other countries. I took photos, read many books in their original form about Asia Minor, and kept notes thinking that they could be useful for a short book of a few hundred pages. That passion, however, culminated into a 2-volume work which Leadership 100 asked me to share with you today. This subject is very close to my heart, and I believe to many of you. Let me ask you, how many of you have visited your father's or grandfather's town or village? How many of you are searching for your Hellenic roots? Are you from Smyrna, Constantinople, Imbros or Tenedos? Are you from Pergamon, Chios, Samos, Saranda Εκκλησιές? Or from Pontus, Cappadocia, Lycia, Pamphylia, or Cilicia? I see people nodding their heads. And I ask, beyond the name, how much do you know about the place of your family roots? Were there great thinkers, inventors, industrialists, and philanthropists like you? Of course there were. I'm also the product of my ancestors. And like so many others, I wanted to know more about my roots. Rather than going to Ancestry.com, I began my own research. My 10+ years of research yielded more than I ever expected. A 2-volume work of about 1,300 pages titled Hellenic Cities in Asia Minor, Where the Stones Still Speak. The first volume includes the western regions of Asia Minor, and the second volume, the remaining regions. His All Holiness, Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew, graciously honored by writing a preface to the book, as well as His Eminence Archbishop Elpidophoros, who in addition reviewed the original manuscript. I thank both of them from my heart. Those 2 prefaces are included in the book. Let me share a word about the subtitle, Where the Stones Still Speak. When I told His All Holiness about my research, he responded with Christ's words, «Εάν ούτι σιωπήσωσιν, οι λύθοι και κράξονται». What does this mean? If they are silenced, the stones will cry out. Thus, His All Holiness gave the idea of the subtitle, and I was pleased to incorporate it. These 2 volumes are dedicated to the history and life of people of about 1,600 Hellenic cities in Asia Minor, the Aegean coastal islands, and Eastern Thrace. The production of this work has been graciously and generously sponsored by Leadership 100 and by Michael Johnson and Kate Johnson of blessed memory of Denver, Colorado. By way of full disclosure, I funded all research for the work and donated all rights to the work to the Archdiocese. The book is, of course, written in English for everyone to read, young or old, and it's organized in individual focus sections of interest for easy and selective reading. Here you see the various regions in Asia Minor, Eastern Thrace, for example, Ionia, where Smyrna is, and so forth, Lycia, Cilicia, Cappadocia, Pontus, and so forth. So you want to read your particular region, you go right there. You don't have to read 2 volumes. Now you may say, I am from Sparta, from Athens, from Tripoli, from Thessaloniki. Why do I care about Asia Minor? Well, perhaps Archbishop Elpidophoros, in his preface to this work, said it best. Even for those without Asia Minor ancestry, this book will put into a more tangible perspective the history of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of America, because the founding of our sacred archdiocese was deeply connected to the Asia Minor catastrophe. And let us not forget that Asia Minor is the place where all 7 ecumenical councils were convened. And in this map, you will see that all 7 churches are, all 7 churches are included within this circle. Okay? Smyrna, Pergamon, and so forth, they're all here. Thyatira, and so forth. And Asia Minor, of course, is where the great 7 churches of the Revelation are shown. And thus the answer is very simple. Our roots are very deep. In antiquity, the Hellenes founded cities everywhere. The Hellenic world extended from Spain all the way to Asia, and from Crimea all the way down to Egypt. You have heard in the Bible, for instance, about Cyrene. It's right here. You have heard about Pantikapaon. It's right up there. You have read about other cities which they have changed the name today and they're not recognizable, but they're in Spain. And all of these cities were indicated by the blue. That's where most of the Greek cities were. And these are before Alexander the Great. Because if you include also the cities Alexander the Great during the Hellenistic era, then we're going way before to India and way down to Egypt. So, just to put everything in perspective. For Plato, the Mediterranean was just a large pond inhabited by Hellenes all around. Cities in Asia Minor, and this is a map that was drawn many years ago, and you could see now how many cities we have. These are all Greek cities. There are so many, the script had to be very small so they can fit there. And there are many more that there's no room to include them. Here is Constantinople, to put it in perspective. Here is, someplace here is Chios, Lesbos, Samos, Rhodos, and so forth, in Cyprus. So for those that are not very well versed in geography, that's where we are. This is Asia Minor and the coastal islands around it. So all these cities, although they're in Asia Minor, were founded by Spartans, by Athenians, by Megarians, by Corinthians, and other Hellenes. All Hellenes were brothers, and from the cities traveled a great distance to compete in the Olympic Games, and like today, dine and dance together at the great pan-Hellenic festivals. Anything that happened in Hellas affected the cities in Asia Minor, and vice versa. The Hellenic world was like a membrane. You push here, it pops there. Herodotus captured this by the term homophonia, that is, the common sentiment of all Hellenes. These words still echo today, same Greek blood and language, and common edifices to gods and offerings to gods and lifestyle. The objective with this book is threefold: decode mythology and present history in its original form as written in antiquity. This way we can avoid interpretations by modern historians and scholars. Serve and nurture orthodoxy and Hellenism, our religious and cultural traditions, and so when the Hellenes excelled as an ethnos. You may also read a chapter on the Hellenicity and persona of Alexander the Great and his route through Asia Minor. There's too much talk, as you know, about whether Alexander the Great was Greek, was not Greek, was Slavic, and all of that. Okay, all of that's clarified and demystified in the book, based on sources. Or a chapter on our explorers. Did the Greeks have explorers? Yes, we went all the way to almost North Pole. On Byzantine history, under the Romans, under the Crusaders, and under the Ottomans. What the world would be if the Eastern Roman Empire, known as the Byzantine Empire, would never have fallen to the Ottoman Empire in 1453. Just 39 years before Columbus sailed to America. What do we know about Asia Minor in history, mythology, orthodoxy, and its connection with main Greece? What was the role of the archons, the Phanariots, and the church in the Greek war for independence? The events that led to the great catastrophe, the Treaty of Lausanne, the political split or the chasmos, or the population exchange, the concerted destructions, massacres, and pogroms. Let me focus on a few of the cities you will find in this book. The book, as I said, includes 1,600, so it's impossible for me to cover them all. I'm going to just pick at random. Let's start with Smyrna. How many of you are from Smyrna? Or have, wow, happy to see quite a few. Initially, Smyrna was a city in Aulis, but in 699 BC, overnight, moved to Ionia. Smyrna is also known as Smyrna with a Z, Smyrni, Myra, and town with the many towers. In Turkish today, Smyrna is Izmir with a Z. Okay? Perhaps they took the first name. Smyrna, described by the Greek geographer Strabo and others, was the most beautiful city, known for its finesse, elegant lifestyle, and fine food and wine. Smyrna remained a vibrant, multicultural city where Hellenism and Orthodoxy flourished, and deservingly was the site of one of the 7 churches. The Church of Agia Fotini and its Astiki Scholi, which was a very large school at the time, had an impact on our churches and school here in America, as we will see further down. During the ensuing centuries, despite the many wars and various overlords, Smyrna remained an illustrious large city where Orthodoxy, Greek culture, trade, and education flourished. Here's an example. Greek schools in Smyrna were the heartbeats for the motherland. These are 2 pictures of Greek school plays back in 1919. Notice that they still wear in those plays the traditional Greek costumes. I would like to recognize that the photos were courtesy of Miss Elaine Allen. In September 22, the Greek section of Smyrna and its churches suffered complete destruction as a result of the political split or the chasmos, the defeat of the Hellenic forces, and the Great Fire. It has been estimated that 50,000 to 100,000 Hellenes and Armenians perished in the fire and massacres. These are the two photos, one taken during the destruction, during the Great Fire, and another one right after the fire. And you see what was left. Nothing, ashes. This is a very interesting picture because it shows you the Greek section of Smyrna in a period between 200 years. For example, on the left, that was taken, it's not a picture, it's a drawing, as a matter of fact, that was published in a book of Reverend Walsh back in 1839. I happened to be in Smyrna in 2023, and I took the picture on the right. When I put both pictures one right next to the other, the resemblance is striking. Now, some of you may ask me, how do you know this is the Greek section on the left? Well, notice that many people wear the fustanella. It's recognizable. There's a priest sitting here. There's a Muslim with his donkey followed by the camels, loaded with his merchandise. And also, if you notice up here, there's a Greek lady on the balcony. How do we know it's a Greek lady on the balcony? Because Muslim ladies were not allowed to be on the balcony. They were not allowed to be seen, okay? So, let's go to Pergamon. At its peak, the kingdom of Pergamon spread from Bosporus to the eastern Mediterranean. Many people don't know that, but this is the kingdom of Pergamon, with capital the city of Pergamon. It starts from Bosporus, which is here, and this is the eastern Mediterranean. This is Rhodos, and Constantinople is right here. Pergamon, the city of Pergamon, was a majestic city, perched on the mountain slope. It was established on the 7th century BC. It had a fantastic library that rivaled that of Alexandria, and we know Alexandria had a huge library. Pergamon was also one of the 7 cities. In Berlin, there is a museum that's known as the Pergamon Museum. The Germans, during the World War I, about that time, took a whole temple from Pergamon and moved it to Berlin, and that's where it's today. How many of you have been to Berlin? Okay. Maybe you have visited that. I have visited that. That's my own picture. Now, in Trapezunda was a major flourishing coastal city of Pontus, and later was the capital of the empire of Trapezunda. Hellenic education was paramount, and Hellenism and Orthodoxy remained steadfast despite the persecutions and external pressures. Early in the 20th century, Trapezunda had about 1,320 students. That's a city of Trapezunda. And I break down here in details if you want to read it. Okay, about 700 in mixed gender schools, 220 in the Frontisterion. This is what they used to call the school of in Pontus, Frontisterion. Parthenagogion, that was a school for girls, and so forth. During persecutions, many Pontian Hellenes moved to cities in Russia and the Black Sea. There they prospered and kept their Hellenic values untarnished. In 1923, with the Treaty of Lausanne, all Hellenes were forced to leave Turkey. They moved to Greece, Europe, and the US. As an example, here you see on the left the mansion of Constantinos Theophylactos in early 1900 in Trapezunda. He moved to Geneva. His house today is a museum. In the center is the house of Varvakis, a great benefactor for Greece, to Varvakion and so forth, who moved to the city Taganrog in Russia. And that's his house. The house of Alferakis on the right, who also moved to Taganrog, because that was a commercial city in Russia. Now let's move to Cappadocia, and let's talk about it. It was a region with underground cities and sculpted mountains. It was the birthplace of the great fathers and a cradle of Hellenic thinking, orthodoxy, and monasticism. It flourished from international trade. The Cappadocians, as a matter of fact, controlled the caviar business. They established the business and they controlled it. Its churches and houses were very large, stone-built, and embellished with exquisite doorways. So, from left, you see the Greek house, which still stands in Synassos. As a matter of fact, we went there one time, my wife and His All Holiness and a small group, and we had dinner there. And next is a picture with the doorways of the houses in Synassos. A bell tower of a church. The church has been demolished, only stand the bell towers. And on the right is the interior of a monastery which is rock-hewn. It's a solid rock. Let's move to another island, to two islands that we heard about also yesterday, Imbros and Tenedos. There are two strategic islands that have guarded the mouth of Hellespont since the Homeric era. The small town of Agii Theodori on Imbros, as we heard yesterday, is the birthplace of Dimitrios Archondonis. Who is Dimitrios Archondonis? The current ecumenical patriarch Bartholomew of Constantinople. And the house also on the same road of Dimitrios Koukouzis. Who is Dimitrios Koukouzis? The late Archbishop Iakovos of blessed memory, primate of the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese of North and South America. Imbros and Tenedos were caught in political negotiations. Sometimes they were Greek, sometimes they were Turkish. And that happened during the beginning of the last century. And as proof, on the left is the passenger record of Steriana Psatha, who arrived on February 20th, 1921, from Tenedos to the United States on board the ship Themistoklis. Now, many of you may have similar documents from your grandfather, grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and so forth. Under the Treaty of Sevres in 1920, Tenedos was part of Greece, so therefore it's listed Tenedos, Greece. Here in the United States, Steriana was married to Spiros Zelelis, also from Tenedos, and when she was naturalized, that happened in 1943, the nationality papers now state Tenedos, Turkey, because in the meantime, Tenedos was ceded to Turkey. The documents are courtesy of my wife, Anita Kartalopoulos, and I'd like to mention that because when I first came to the United States, I met both Steriana and her husband, Spiros. And I'm sure you all have similar stories to tell. Yesterday, we heard a story by George Postolos, and here's another one. Here is an excerpt. Before I go to this, let me say a few things here, that when the first Tenedians came to the United States, they built with their own hands a large church in Toledo, Ohio. They brought a priest. they created a large community. Perhaps they didn't have their own houses, but they had the church. And you see, the community was organized, and they had also a large Greek school, because education at the time was very, very important to them. These are also pictures that my wife, Anita, also was kind to give me for the book and also for the presentation. Another example of education which was paramount to that community in Toledo was a handwritten report by the priest at the time as a report to the Archdiocese of America. And Reverend Nikolaos Sakelaridis writes to the Archdiocese, and that's important, pay attention to this. With respect to the inquiry of teaching staff and pupils, they were asking the Toledo Church, how many pupils do you have? What's the staff? What do you do there? He writes, here I advise that the teachers are my son Dimitrios Sakelaridis, a third-year graduate of the Theological School of Chalki, and Athanasia Chrysidou, a graduate of the Αστική Σχολή of Agia Fotini in Smyrni. Chalki is the island that you know, that we want to open the school today. Let's go to another place. Now we move farther south and east. Let's go to Adana. Adana was an ancient Hellenic cultural and commercial city in Cilicia. Cilicia is next to Syria. It became a gateway for many Hellenes during the events of 1922 and the population exchange in 1923. Here's a good example. On the left, we see Tafi Sartiloglu, and that's a picture in 1919. Now, these two documents tell a whole story. If you pay attention to the dates and the embassies and where he went to get a stamp to escape from Turkey, because during the days you had the First World War, the end of that, and then you had the city of Sevres that changed to the city of Lausanne, and people were trying to escape from Turkey. So here you see a visa in the middle that was issued by the Consulate General of Greece in Beirut, October 21st, to Kyprianos Tsartiloglu. Then they left Beirut the next day, October 22nd, arrived at Piraeus, Greece. 2 days later, on October 24th, they arrived at Alexandria, Egypt. Now think, from Cilicia, they went to the Beirut, to the Greek embassy, they got the papers, they went to Piraeus in Greece, and then they went back to Alexandria. Why Alexandria? Because Alexandria at the time was under British control, not Turkish control. So, now for my old friends are from Chios here, I should say a few words. Chios was an Aegean island west to Krini. Now, many of you may not know Krini, but you know Chesme. Chesme is Krini. And Smyrna, and one of the 12 founding members of Ionia. And that's why Chios is included also in the book, because it's part of Ionia, the old days. Chios Island was naturally separated into two parts, the Apano Meria, the northern part, and the Kato Meria, the southern part, because it's a long island. Since antiquity, Chios played an important role in maritime history and in winemaking, and prospered. The Chian ships sailed the Mediterranean and the Black Sea, and the Chian wine and the masticha were internationally known from antiquity. The Romans, Pliny and Cato, considered the Chian wine to be the very best in the world, and therefore was the most expensive. The Chiotes, this is Chios. On the right is the Eritrea Peninsula in Turkey, and you see how close it is, and the Long Island, the Πάνω μεριά, κάτω μεριά. And the Chians, of course, were in the business of maritime trade all the time. The Chiotes kept the Hellenic values under the Romans, the Byzantines, the Genoese, from Genoa, Italy, northern, western Italy, and the Ottomans. In 56 AD, Apostle Paul, on his return from his third missionary journey, after arriving at the city of Assos in Asia Minor, stopped at Mytilene and then passed by Chios. This is in the Acts. The Chiotes also played a key role in the war for independence. The catastrophe of Chios, that we all know, by the Ottomans, woke up and enraged Europe and the Philhellenes in Europe. This event has been immortalized, as you know very well, by many poets and painters, and this is a famous painter by Delacroix. So, my presentation would be incomplete without Constantinople. Initially, it was called Byzantium. It was founded in 667 BC by Megarians, από τα Μέγαρα, Corinthians and Argives, so this is the link, Asia Minor and Greece, at the mouth of Bosporus. It was renamed by Emperor Constantine the Great in 330 AD to New Rome, also known as Constantinople, as Vasilevousa and Queen of the cities. In the picture, you see Constantinople. It's a drawing, it's not a picture. That was done early in the 19th century, and that was from the book of Reverend Walsh. And this is a drawing. Reverend Walsh was accompanied by a very good person in drawing something. And this is a drawing. It looks like a picture, but it's actually a drawing. So, this is a city map of Constantinople, Byzantine Constantinople. This is also an artist's rendering based on what we know about Constantinople, the city map and so forth. You see here the Hippodrome, Hagia Sophia is someplace here, the palaces are here, and the various harbors of Constantinople. Now, I would like to mention three of the many, many churches in Constantinople. On the left, of course, is Hagia Sophia. In the middle, you recognize Hora, which is the Church of Savior. And on the right is Hagia Irene. Now, Hagia Sophia and Holy Savior are Muslim worship places. And Hagia Irene is not operating. So, we come to, oh, I'm sorry, before I go to the next one, I would like you to mention these buildings in Constantinople, if you know. How many can recognize that? Agios Georgios in the Phanar, right? This is Chalki. This is what we want to reoperate. Here we have the Megali του Γιάννου Σχολή that was recently closed by the Turks. This is the Zografion Greek school in Pera. And this is Hagia Sophia. And I put also here this, which is modeled after Hagia Sophia. This is the blue mask. Now, you see the resemblance. One of the royal or the chief architect at the time, during the Ottoman period, was Mimar Sinan. How many of you have heard this name? Mimar Sinan. Mimar Sinan is chief architect of the Royal Ottoman Empire. Mimar Sinan, I also write in the book, his original name was Yosif Doganoglu, from Agia Nargiri in Cappadocia. He was the one who established what we call today Ottoman architecture, model after Hagia Sophia. So, here is a picture, the very first book that came out from the press, and I had the pleasure to be in Constantinople and present it to His All Holiness. Enthusiastically, of course, he saw it to the audience at the time. So we come back to where we started. I'm from Sparta, from Athens, from Tripoli, from Thessaloniki. Why do I care about Asia Minor and its history? Well, do I care? Yes, because we're all brothers and here together. And as Archbishop Elpidophoros said it so well, and I tried to show, the founding of our Sacred Archdiocese is intrinsically connected to Asia Minor, as we continue to be today. Thank you.